Hi, I am Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. And today's message is entitled 10 Ways You Know You're Dealing with Emotionally Immature People, Part 1. And before I get into the Bible teaching, I just want to remind you that we always do what? We wear a tie so that we can make an impact, right? So that means we're analyzing, we're troubleshooting, we're implementing, we're empowering and impacting the women in our homes, our communities, and then where? Around the world, right? And the easiest and quickest way for us to do that is to hit the like button and to share this message that you find a value in with someone else who might find it valuable as well, right? Whenever it comes to something that's dealing with biblical truths, healing, wholeness, right, and perspectives, that's some good stuff, right? Because it's all kind of things we can share. But when we share things that's dealing with the gospel, right, and dealing with healing, wholeness, right, and other women becoming empowered, that's good stuff. And so, without further ado, I want to get right on into the message. Now, we all might have a bad day, right? And sometimes we can even have a bad week, to be honest. And none of us are perfect. That's the thing about it, right? And so, there are times in our lives when we will go through trials, and then not only go through trials, but we'll go through trials and tribulations, right? And then these trials and tribulations will knock us off of our feet, and we're not at our best. We're simply not at our best, right? And when we're not at our best, instead of us responding, we tend to react, right? And think about it. It's extremely hot outside, right? And or in your apartment, right? And so then everybody from the household, you're hot and you're irritable, right? The next thing you know, the individuals in the household are responding to each other out of being hot and irritated, right? Instead of being the best version of themselves. And so let us not get this wrong. Let us not get this wrong at all, right? We never want to get to the point where we're allowing our environment, other people's behavior, and our trials to serve as a license, right? For us to sin and to use other people as punching bags and or poison containers, right? And it's kind of like, even, sometimes people might have had death in the family. They might be going through hard times, and as they, how the figure of speech goes, they might say, well, why is she acting like that? Why is he like that? And then, other people might say, well, which, girl, he going through, dude, man, he going through, brother, just give him some time. He going through, she going through. But then you got 5 and 10 years later, and we're still using that same excuse for people. It's like we're giving them a license to behave in whatever manner that they behave in whatever way they want to treat us, right? Instead of holding them accountable, right? And so what happens is that when you have an emotionally immature individual, that means you've got an individual who is an adult, right? Has an adult body, has an adult appearance on the outside, right? There's nothing like, oh, maybe it's an adult, maybe it's a teenager, maybe it's a child, maybe it's a young adult. From its appearance, from its whole entire appearance, this person is an adult, right? But the thing about it is, when you start interacting with emotionally immature individuals, that is the dead giveaway right there. As soon as you start interacting with them, you will notice that forever, whatever reason, this individual is stunted, is what psychologists like to call it, right? They've stepped outside of the actual age they're at, and they are interacting with you from whatever age they experienced that traumatic event and or wound, so to speak, right? When they grew up. And so what happens when you have individuals with narcissistic personality disorder and other spirits of narcissism running through them, they have this very issue in common, right? And so what happens is you've got little boys and little girls running around who look like grown men and grown women, right? And what happens is that they are trapped at the ages, whether it was as a child, right? 5 or 6 year old, or as a 13, 14, 15-year-old. They are trapped at whatever age they ended up dealing with that traumatic event. They're trapped and stunted there, emotional wise, right? and their growth emotionally, right? And so they're unable to make decisions as if they are the adults that they are, right? And so that's why what happens is that they create, people who are narcissistic create these images, right? A false sense of self, because they push the real person down so far down that they almost don't even know who the real person is at this point, because the real person was shattered in childhood, right? And so what happens is that because they've got that root, that core shame and that core insecurity and all of that going on, right? And that they were stunted at this age. So what happens is they running around with this image, this false mirrored image of themselves, right? This perfect image of themselves that they are hoping and praying nobody can break through. And so that's what happens, is that when you are dealing with these people, though, as soon as that very image is shattered, okay, and that image is going to be shattered, as soon as that image gets shattered for whatever reason, these individuals will go into what is called narcissistic rage, right? And when an individual is going through narcissistic rage, the narcissistic injury happens first, and then it's followed by narcissistic rage, right? And so that's why it becomes very problematic, right? Co-parenting with narcissistic individuals, going to court with narcissistic individuals, going through a divorce with narcissistic individuals, dealing with child visitations with narcissistic individuals, right? Any and all of that, because it's like I said, you're dealing with children, you're dealing with teenagers, right? In adult bodies who are determined to win at all costs. And think about it. When you play games with your children or another child that's in your family, or either a friend's child, any other child you've played games with, they hate losing. They totally hate losing. So you view adults who are really children, right? Emotionally, and teenagers who hate losing. That's even worse. Everybody in the family, in the business, right? In the ministry, at the church, in that department at work, right? They know, oh boy, we better get out of this person's way. They're going to blow up. They are about to blow up. So everybody knows as soon as this individual is acting a certain way, they better move, because it's all going to be like fire, really, right? They think it's going to literally be hell on earth, literally, if that person shows that wrathful side of them, so to speak, right? And so what happens is that if we want to grow up, that requires us dealing with our childhood wounds, dealing with unresolved trauma, going to therapy, going to coaching, going to mentors and spiritual leaders and pastors and support and recovery groups. It's a ton of work. Yes, there's pain involved. I'm not going to even lie to you. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but it is worthwhile, right? And so the first thing that an emotionally immature individual will do is that they will destroy your property. One of the quickest ways to know you're dealing with an emotionally immature individual is to be in the presence of someone destroying property when they get angry. And it's not a pretty picture at all. I worked at a company years ago. I was in my 20s, and our supervisor was upset, right? She was upset because the CEO and the CFO had just spoken to her in the suite across the hall. So whatever they said to her, she didn't like. She came back over to our side, and I say our because I'm talking about where the accounting department resided, right? She came back over to our side, walked in, slammed that door, walked past our cubicles, went to her office, and slammed the door so hard that the windows, I thought, were going to break out of that entire floor, is how hard she slammed her office door. And so then you got the subordinates, right? All of us, we're looking like, what in the world just happened? And so we're all kind of looking at each other, kind of buck-eyed and like, like a deer in headlights. What in the world is going on? And so it's like either she forgot she was at work, or this is how she reacted when she got angry, right? And she had about 10 years on us. She had to be at least 10 years older than us, right? And none of us had ever behaved like that before in the office. But mind you, this is the supervisor throwing a tantrum because she was angry about what was said to her, right? Then you have other people who are emotionally immature, who like throwing things, breaking them, stomping on them, etc., right? And so this is what happened in a recent movie that I watched entitled Wrath. You got Chastity, the main character. She's dating a guy who's a malignant narcissist, right? And we got narcissists of all different types, right? I don't care what type it is, they have a deep core, a deep inner core of insecurity and shame. And this insecurity is what's driving arrogant behavior as well as toxic jealousy. So Chastity's boyfriend was jealous because he caught her twice talking to an old high school classmate, right? This is a guy she dated for a few months in high school, but she had recently ran into him, was reconnecting. There was absolutely nothing going on. However, he ended up developing that narcissistic injury, right, which turned into narcissistic rage. So because he couldn't control himself, the only thing he felt he could do was what? Take her phone and throw it on the floor, crack it, and then step on it and break it, and slide it across the floor. Okay, you want to talk to him, then you can talk to him all whatever long, and he threw some expletives in there, of course. But, she's looking like, oh, wow. So then that was like the point where she knew, you know what, I need to end this. I don't need to be in a relationship with someone like this, because if they're taking my belongings and throwing and breaking them, the next thing you know, you can tell from what was the reading between the lines, he's going to bump this up a level. And the next thing you know, it's going to be me, right? And so what ended up happening is she broke up with him. Then he went and bought her a phone so he could love bomb her, right? And to seal in that trauma bond. So he goes and buys her a phone, offers her the phone, and she tells him, I don't know if I'm use the phone or not. It was good, but like, this is the end of it. And then he comes and love bombs her again by acting like he's vulnerable with this childhood trauma story. And of course, what happened? He was able to draw her back in. And then they end up finally breaking up when, as we mentioned before, first he threw the phone and broke it up, right? The next thing you know, he's throwing her down into the street, right? They're in the hospital. He goes to the gift shop and he buys her a t-shirt in the gift shop to make up for it. And she's like, no, we're done. I told you 3 times and we're out. We are done, right? And so what happens is we've got to be really careful when we are in relationships. And this doesn't just have to be romantic. This could be friendships. This could be other sisters and brothers in Christ. This could be ministry and business partners, right? This could be in the workplace. This could be anywhere, family, etc. When we're in relationships with individuals who are taking our belongings and destroying them, right? We know we've got to be careful, because the next thing you know, if I can take some belongings and I can destroy those and I can destroy property, the next thing I know, right, that individual is going to be after you, after your physical body is going to be in jeopardy, right? And so when you look at Absalom and Samson in the Bible, you got 2 men who were emotionally immature, right? They could not figure out a way to use their words and status to get it what it is that they needed, right? And thus they figured out the only option left for them was to set fields on fire, right? They were arsonists, so to speak. Absalom had his servants to set Joab's field on fire. And remember, Joab, that was David's right-hand man, right? Joab wasn't any better, though. Both Absalom and Joab were narcissists. Joab was a communal narcissist, right? And Joab ended up ignoring Absalom's request. Okay, so it's like he couldn't figure out a way to send a message back saying that he was not going to go to David on Absalom's behalf, right? The only option he felt was that he just keep ignoring him. And then Absalom couldn't figure out another way to talk to Joab without having his messengers to go and burn up his barley field. I mean, it's just childish, right? And the thing about it is that when you have 2 or more narcissistic people throwing a fit and competing against one another, it's bound to get ugly, brutal, and everyone else is going to witness a very childish display of actions between 2 adults. Because when you got 2 narcissistic individuals together, it's like this love-hate type of relationship, a push and pull in between them. It's like that fearful, avoidant love attachment style. 1 minute, they're lovey-dovey on each other, and then the next minute, I can't stand her. And they're telling the other employees that and hoping that you'll say something, because guess what? As soon as they're back in good grace with that other narcissistic person, guess what they're going to do? They're going to tell that other employee that that's what you said. They're not going to say what they said. They're going to say everything that you said about that individual during the time that they were mad at that individual, right? But it is something to be reckoned with, to end up seeing two narcissistic individuals going at it and throwing temper tantrums, so to speak. And so remember, when it comes to this communal narcissist, because that's what Joab was, right? Their sole purpose is doing whatever it is that they can do to gain validation from a large group of people. It's like, why have one or two or three? If we're in this club together, why not have everybody validate me? So they'll do things to set themselves up for validation, whatever they need to do. And when I say whatever they need to do, I mean whatever they need to do. And as we talked about before, they overestimate their own abilities, right? Underestimate the length of time it's going to take to get things done. Overpromise on when the goods and services and products, etc., are going to be able to be delivered. And then they will throw you under the bus so that they can be the savior of the day when everything hits the fan. They will literally create drama, make it so that they don't meet the deadlines just to be the savior of the day and to get the validation from a group of people. That's very sick and twisted. It's also part of emotional immaturity, right? And Joab was so insecure in his position with David and so concerned about being able to get that validation from all of the people, right? From all of the Israelites. He figured the only thing that he could do is what? Take out Absalom, David's son. But before he took out Absalom, David's son, he took out Abner, right? And Abner was related to Saul. And after he took out Absalom, he took out Amasa. And it's almost like he had a thing for taking out people whose names started with the letter A. And I had to laugh as I was going through it and preparing for this Bible teaching. I'm like, you got Abner, then you've got Absalom, and then you've got Amasa. He took out all three of these individuals, and this was all because they were a threat to his position. Forbid if David decided to bring Abner on from Saul's side, right? Plus, it was like Joab made it look like I'm getting you back from killing my brother. But what it really was also was the threat to his position, right? From him being the right-hand man to David, right? So he was going to kill any and everybody that got in the way, right? It was the perfect opportunity. So it looked like he was looking out for his brother. But remember, he wanted to be there, right there in that same position and not leave it. Same reason with Absalom. Absalom was rebelling and led a revolt against David, his father. And guess what? If he was going to succeed, that means that what? Joab was going to be kicked out of the way. Joab wanted to make sure that didn't happen. So it's like, I'm going to finish him off as he's hanging here in this tree. Because none of the other men were going to be that foolish enough to do that. They'd already heard David, and they mentioned to Joab, you heard the king. He said to go easy on the young lad. That was neither here nor there for Joab. Then you got Amasa. David had removed Joab from his position after he'd already killed two people and knew that that was a threat. If I got somebody that can't follow instructions and that's killing people who don't deserve to be killed, this is a problem for me. So David removes Joab from his position, right? Promotes Amasa. Amasa takes too long to come back. Joab comes upon Amasa, right? As he's going to settle this other dispute. So it's not another revolt against David. And he, stumbles upon him, so to speak, pretends like they're having a regular conversation, pulls this sword out and lets him have it. And then just lays him out in the street, right? This is the kind of things that communal narcissists do. There's nothing communal or community about them. They're all out for themselves. And Joab had what? He had a murderous spirit. In scripture, in 2 Timothy 3:36-30, it says, when Joab came out from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah. but David did not know about it. See, David didn't even know that Joab was going after Abner. And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the midst of the gate to speak with him privately. See, he always had a way. When it came to Abner and Amasa, he had a way of just like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Boom. We got to be careful, people that walk around like that with these murderous spirits, right? And it said he took him aside in the midst of the gate to speak with him privately, and there he struck him in the stomach so that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother, right? Afterwards, when David heard of it, he said, I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord for the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. So David, in other words, like, hey, I'm letting you know I ain't had any part of this. I don't want that, his blood on my hands. I had nothing to do with this, right? And so think about it. When anybody threatened Joab's position, he was going to let them have it. So all three of those men, it just so happened, like I said, their names start with the letter A. Then you got Samson, who ended up tying up 300 foxes and setting the fields on fire that belonged to the Philistines once he found out that his father-in-law took his wife and gave his wife to his friend. That was some messed up stuff, but you go and you just set fields on fire, not even thinking about the fact, okay, all of these cattle could be destroyed. People could be destroyed. And what happened as a result of Samson doing that is that the Philistines went on and burnt his first wife up, her and her father, burnt them up as a result of what it is that Samson did. Then he really wanted revenge. Samson was emotionally immature. He had an anger problem. And instead of him resolving that unresolved trauma, he resolved it by going into a rage, right? And when we go into a rage, there's just no telling what could end up happening. We're a loose cannon. The second thing, the second way you know you're dealing with an emotionally immature person is that they are possessive of you and your possessions, right? It's nothing worse than being in a relationship with somebody, and then sometimes they don't even want you. Like once they've discarded of you, doing that narcissistic abuse cycle, they don't even want you anymore. They don't want you, but guess what? They don't want anybody else to have you, right? And then if you're not at that discard phase and you're with them, their only desire is to isolate you and to have it where you are hanging out with them and nobody else, right? And that's a slippery slope, right? Because you'll notice they'll be giving you like these backhanded compliments and remarks and mentioning all of this stuff about these other people that you're hanging out with. And you start to think to yourself, well, what's wrong with these other people? There's nothing wrong with these other people. The individuals you're hanging out with are immature. They're narcissistic. And the only way that they can think of dealing with this situation, right, is to talk about that other person, to judge them, to criticize them, right, to critique them, right, in a very bad way, to condemn them, all of it, and to gaslight along with it when you say something about it. And in Judges 14:18, it says, on the seventh day before sunset, the men of the city said to him, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? So he said to them, if you hadn't plowed with my young cow, you wouldn't know my riddle now, right? And so even though Samson had the strong spirit of the Lord operating through him, yet and still he was emotionally immature, referring to his wife, my young cow. And in some translations, he called, it says a heifer. But this is how you refer to it, said my cow, my heifer, as if she's an object. He was a womanizer. He was not narcissistic, but he was a womanizer, right? And so what happens is that when you work hard for something and these narcissistic individuals started claiming your things as their own by gaslighting you, that's not a good thing. Laban did it with Jacob. It says, then Laban answered Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children my children, and the flocks my flocks. Everything you see is mine. But what can I do today for these daughters of mine or the children that they have born? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I. Let it be a witness between the two of us. That was a very gaslighting, childish statement. To come now, like everything's good. You know everything good. No, if everything was good, you wouldn't have followed me. You wouldn't have tried to hoover me back to that narcissistic system of working for you, right? If everything was good, you wouldn't have gaslit me into saying, these are your daughters and these are your flocks, and all of this other stuff, right? All of those different things, right? Jacob worked 14 years for those women, and then he worked 6 years for the flock. But according to Laban, it was mine. And that's the problem with narcissistic individuals. Everything is mine. This is mine. This is mine. This is my this and my that. And so when you go to court with these type of individuals, you're going through a divorce, right? The judge orders that your material possessions be split. The house, the couch, whatever it is you own. And then the next thing you know, instead of going on and do what they're supposed to do, they pretend like they've got amnesia and didn't hear what the judge said. So it's time to split up the stuff. This is my couch. This is my house. This is my pots and pans. These are my keys. My kids. This is my furniture. Forget about whatever ruling the judge said, right? Because it's mine. This is my stuff. This is mine. These are mine. My kids, my this, my that, right? The child in them is running the show. Think about it. 3-year-olds go around saying that, right? 3-year-olds do it all the time. The last point that I want to make today, the third way that you know you're dealing with an emotionally immature adult, is that they always want to be the center of attention. Whether it's positive or negative attention, they'll take it, right? If it's negative attention, they'll let it all hang out, the worst version of them. They'll sit in church doing that mess, crossing their arms and looking like, I dare you to say something to me. I devil dare you to say something to me. Looking mean and basically having everybody walking on eggshells at church. They'll do that kind of stuff, right? And then it can go from that range to look at me, look at my outfit, look at my shoes, look at my purse, look at my hair, look at my name and how I got that comma and the title behind it, right? Look at my dog. I'm all of that in a bag of chips, right? And then what happened in Matthew 23, 1-12, Jesus had a message for this, right? Because all of this is just basically saying, look at how important I am, right? Look at me, look at how important I am, and look at how much I got it going on, baby, right? It says, then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples. The scribes and the Pharisees are seated in the chair of Moses. So he's letting them know they got authority. Therefore, do whatever they tell you and observe it. So he's letting them know, like, they got authority. You need to obey authority, right? But don't do what they do because they don't practice what they teach. So he's letting them know what they're telling you, right? You got to observe because they're in authority. Don't be trying to do what they're doing, right? And that was because they had double standards and they were double-minded individuals. All narcissistic people are like that. And he went on to say they tie up heavy loads that's hard to carry and put them on people's shoulders. But they themselves are willing to lift a finger, to move them. They do everything to be seen by others. They enlarge their phylacteries and lengthen their tassels. They love the place of honor at banquets, the front seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called rabbi by people. So basically, they took their prayer boxes, and in order to make people say, oh, look at how virtuous and holy they are, they enlarged the prayer boxes. Think about how ridiculous that looks, to have a prayer box attached to your head, this big old prayer box hanging as you're walking, or either having it at their wrist and attached, a big old prayer box, or an elongated tassel hanging from your prayer shawl to look important, right? But that's what self-righteous, cerebral narcissists do, right? The self-righteous ones, they have that love of knowledge, right? And they also have that love of rules. That's a toxic combination for them. But they also do what? Carry toxic jealousy, insecurity, arrogance, right? All of that. And they have a murderous spirit. Look at what happened to Jesus, right? He says, do not call any, he said, but you are not to be called rabbi because you have one teacher and you're all brothers and sisters. So he's letting them know, don't think that you're above the other person, like one of you guys are more important than the other. Don't get caught up into that. Do not call anyone on earth your father because you have one Father who is in heaven. You are not to be called instructors either because you have one instructor, the Messiah. So he was keeping them grounded. Like, don't, let this go to your head because you're hanging out with me. The greatest among you will be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So tomorrow, Lord willing, I am going to go over part 2 on 10 ways, right? That you know you're dealing with emotionally immature people. I also want you to remember that you are enough. Reclaim your power, soul, and identity today. and then reclaim the power, soul, and identity of your calling. Grab your keys to the kingdom and get your inheritance. I am Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. God bless. I love you. And until next time.